Right, so the moment y'all been waiting on now, the Matrix
Woohoo.
Resurrections. Hell of a way to end off 2021. I just want to see that one time, right?
Boom.
Now, in the description to this recording here, I'm gonna put where myself, Ricardo, Summer, and Julian, who could make it. We talked about well, this was in the for the 15th anniversary of the Matrix sequels that will be Reloaded and Revolutions. Yeah, we talked about our thoughts on just the how we got into the Matrix, the first film from 1999, and just overall thoughts on those two sequels, which had a lot of great ideas, but really weren't as great as the original one, right? So because we're bringing you into our world, into our Matrix world, so to speak. I would like to hear Reed, how just quick thoughts on just how you were introduced to the Matrix, what you thought about the first film, and particularly what you thought about Reloaded and Revolutions before we get into Resurrections, right? So, Michael, if you don't mind, we could just kick things off. How did you get into the Matrix? What does that movie mean to you? And what do you think about the two subsequent sequels?
All right. So because I know everybody generally gonna say first one was awesome, the other two blah blah. I'll try to make it a little more interesting and tell a story. So in '99, I remember when the trailers hit for the first Matrix. Everybody was well, where I was from, everybody was talking about it because I know some people thought it looked like crap. And I remember we couldn't figure out what was going on. We couldn't figure out what it was. People started to say the quote, what was it? You can't be told what the Matrix is, something like that. You have to
Yeah,
see it
you
for
have, you have
yourself,
to you
right?
have to see it for yourself.
Yeah, and everybody was quoting it. People who didn't even see the movie would come to school and start saying that. It's like, did you see the movie? No, but I better than you. So they would just say that over and over and over. And I remember it being wild. And the first person to see it was I remember my older sister. And she comes home after she sees it, and she looks like completely like in shock. And she just like she sits down because we were, this is what we used to do. My siblings in the '90s. When one of us get to see a movie, the other one would come home and just tell the whole story. I guess times change, right? People hate spoilers now, but we would just tell each other the whole thing. And my sister came and she like blew our minds with the whole thing. Oh, and this happens, and that happens, and this happens. That I was like, yes, I'm gonna see this. I was like, okay, I'm gonna see it. Ready to see it and everything. And then my parents was like, no, no, I don't want you to go and watch that. I was like, oh, okay, crap. So fast forward a while, like a year later, I finally got to see it on regular TV, sadly. And my mind was blown. I was like, I couldn't believe it. Bullet time was like the craze. Everybody in school and pop culture, everybody was all bullet time. We used to do, like breakdancing had a weird particular popularity in the late '90s, early 2000s, and for some reason, all the classes had their own dance groups and stuff. And we would have like neo moves. Everybody at the time when they was doing dances, they had a neo move. So is that how you do the bullet time with the going back, or you do some other comments like that. And it really took over the whole world. And I remember when the trailer dropped for Reloaded. Um, Obviously, I was a little older, and that would be 2003. And I remember going to see some other crap movie. I don't know, White Chicks or something, right? In 2003. One of those some movie that was super great. And we was pushing the line in the movie theater in my hometown because the Matrix trailer for Reloaded started, and people were still cutting tickets to go in. And everybody in the line started to get like literally angry. Hurry up, the trailer, because no YouTube, right? And they like
Right.
ready to fight in the line, and people started to push, and it started to get all aggressive, and right, and, and everybody as soon as they
Oh.
round the corner, they just like running quick into the aisles because the trailer happening. And I started to join in the chaos because I heard all kinds of stuff. I hear Agent Smith talking. I hear people screaming and carrying on and bawling and yelling. And then I started to get like one of those guys. I said, hurry up, move. I said, oh, guys, I was like, I want to see it. Right? And then all I reached in time to see was when Neo was doing the spin kicky thing in Reloaded,
Oh
which
yeah.
was the last shot of the trailer. And everybody was like screaming, and then it just cuts to it coming soon. And I get so mad because that was my only shot to see it. That was my only chance to see the Matrix Reloaded trailer. Because I think they would have released it online at that point, but I distinctly remember. I think at that point we cut our internet, and then it would take like 2 days to stream a trailer, anyways. But we didn't have internet at that time, so that was it. It was just to see that. But when it came out, like everybody else, when I saw Reloaded, I was like, what? I was like, this didn't feel like the first one. This kind of feel kind of empty. And that's the best way I could describe it. It was done and it was empty. And I asked my sister, because I remember in '99 when she came like running home, like tripping out. I was like, when you saw that, my sister was like, I don't know. And then when Revolutions came out, I didn't even bother. I think the hype train had kind of changed because once people saw the second one was kind of so. I think Revolutions, the hype was way down because I remember when Revolutions came out, I didn't bother to go. And one of the kids in class, he came in and he just comes through the door and nobody asked him a question. It was like early in the morning, we about to do math. And he just bounced in the door. He's like, Revolutions was shit. And then we start class. You know, like,
wow.
He walked along and he was vexed for the whole day. He was just vexed for the whole day because I think he was a bigger fan than me. I thought I was a huge Matrix fan. You know, and he was just so I was in class and for some reason the teacher and him start a dialogue. You know, and the teacher's like this 48-year-old man or something, right? And they just start talking about how revolutions and shit. And I was like, damn, I was like, all right, well, I'll go watch that on TV. And that's how I saw Revolutions. I eventually saw it on TV. And, you know, I really couldn't care. At that point, me, special effects was obviously real cool because, you know, special effects, right? But yeah, that was it. That was my personal little journey with Matrix. And when we get into the fourth one, I'll chime back in there. Y'all could go ahead.
right. CC, your history with the Matrix trilogy, the OG Matrix trilogy. When it was a trilogy, right? Technically,
right. Well, it's interesting because the Matrix is one of those franchises that I never, because of my bizarre idiosyncratic childhood, it was one of those things that like maybe I heard about vaguely, but never had the chance to, like, I never got involved in all of the crazy hype. I never got involved in like a lot of like the big anticipation and the excitement, and certainly not waiting for each of the films to come out. I kind of came into the world of like online spaces and geek culture all with the whole trilogy having already come out and all of the general consensuses and everything, and everyone doing all the like YouTube video essays explaining how the first film is the greatest movie of all time, but how the other two just aren't all that great and whatever. And so in this context, I watch the original trilogy, and it's weird. Like, my experience was with the first one was, oh, this is pretty good. I think all of the people online have already talked all the best parts to death, but this is pretty good. And then I watched but like, I don't know, it didn't like blow my mind or anything. And then I watched the other two and it was like, oh, these are surprisingly good. Like, given how everyone was saying these are like the worst movies ever made, like finally watching them, they're actually pretty good. And like, I appreciate them. Like, I'm a big fan of the Wachowskis as filmmakers, like, which is hilarious. And that's like, I kind of feel like that's a controversial statement, but I legitimately love the Wachowskis as filmmakers. Like, Bound is my favorite.
Not a controversial statement. They are great filmmakers.
Yeah, Ricardo's a huge fan.
Yeah.
Like,
tell them about Speed Racer.
I love. Yeah. Like, I love Bound. Like, it's my favorite film of theirs. I like the Matrix trilogy is really good. I really love Speed Racer and Cloud Atlas. Like, they're both movies that swing they both swing pretty damn wide and don't always quite hit, but I think Cloud Atlas hits more than it misses, honestly. And then Jupiter Ascending is terrible, but it's a fascinating terrible. Like, it's like it's never a boring terrible. Like, you're watching the whole thing and like there's never a moment when you're not like laughing. So I have been, and I do need to get around to Sense8 at some point, but like, I have been wanting the Wachowskis to come back and do some other project for some time. And like,
Gatchaman, they should do Gatchaman.
Oh yeah, you're right. No, absolutely. Oh, why didn't I think of that? And like, I know, and like, it's interesting because like you hear about them and you hear about all the different projects they considered and then dropped, and then their production company went under in the last few years. But then they finally announced that, like, well, Lana is doing this new Matrix, and I got, very excited. And so I watched it, and it's, like, not getting into my thoughts about it, but it very much kind of ties in with my thoughts about, like, with the rest of the trilogy and kind of with my feelings of the Wachowskis as filmmakers in general. But no, that's kind of my place with the Matrix trilogy. I missed the hype and kind of very much came onto the internet when they were, like, already established and well known, and everyone already had all their thoughts and opinions about them, and then, like, got to experience them for myself with, like, some slightly different, like, I give the whole like each installment of the original trilogy like a good 9 out of 10, like first film, second, and third, and the Animatrix, like, they're all like 9 out of 10 films for me, like, really good and, like, really impressive, and, like, what they are in some of them, what they're attempting to do and what the goal is. I don't find them as confusing as a lot of people did. I was always, it's kind of like with Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3, where people talk about, oh, they're so convoluted, I can't understand what's going on. And I'm always confused because I never got confused watching Matrix 2 and 3 for whatever reason. Like, there's very little about those that, like, doesn't make sense. I feel like part of that also is that, like, I don't always take it the most seriously, so I'm not sitting here trying to, like, figure out the deeper meaning of it. So, like, there's not a lot of it that, like, I'm sitting here trying to, like, spend hours writing an essay for to decode. But yeah, but no, that's my history with the Matrix. I love Wachowskis, are my favorite filmmakers. I enjoy the original trilogy quite a bit.
All right, Mr. Hutchings, your history with the Matrix when it was a trilogy.
I legitimately sometimes just wonder, like, if I just go in a portal or something, because the films I see and the responses I just hear sometimes, I just be like, yo. Because I remember being in, I have no idea how my love for Matrix happened, because in 1999 I was not making my own money, so I wasn't going to the cinema. But I saw it somewhere. And then in 2003, I was in the office, and we were getting ready. The trailer for it, I remember being in the cinema as well and seeing that kind of stuff. But I do remember going and seeing the second one. It was a big deal. And seeing the third one, especially in the third one in Movie Town. And I had a whole moment. I remember at the end of it, like, the orphan who's just screaming, "The war is over! The war is over!" And I'm sitting there in the back of Movie Town like, "The war is over!"
So that shit is goofy, by the way.
Yeah, that's what
I just like, listen, the war is over, damn it. And the oh god, Juno Reactor, and I can't remember his name right now. I'm getting a blank. But basically, the soundtrack, the idea of pulling the Upanishad into Neo Damarang, and so having that, and that's the music that plays when Smith and Neo fight.
Yeah.
So I have been, and then, like, sitting down and playing into, like, how everything is. Oh, okay, so Sati means this, and this is what that is. That that just felt right in line with my growing up theological life. And I was like, I loved the trilogy. I still walk around harassing my friends from time to time with vis-a-vis, concordantly, etc., etc. And I will shoot this little piece to it. I think it is because of my general love for the trilogy. Like, I've been sitting down for years thinking, how would this work if it came back? Because there's a line that the Oracle says at the end of the movie when she turns to Sati after the architect says, I will release all of them. What do you take me for, human? And she says to Sati that no doubt, I think we'll see him again. And then the notion of, like, this being the 6th iteration of the Matrix, and clearly we're dealing with reincarnation and how it will come back, and clearly Neo isn't dead, and maybe he was in the sunrise and all that kind of, I don't know. So I have been gleefully excited about the trilogy. I've often heard the whole Matrix 1 was great, 2 and 3 was a problem. Matrix 1 for me was a really awesome science fiction kung fu film. 2 and 3 was exposition and philosophy, or I don't know what, however you want to pace it. But for me, it was good. The idea of like Smith possessing, taking over the human body because it was inevitable. The entire speech from the Merovingian and his cake and the architect. These were things that stay in my brain. So I generally have had, I don't know, that's probably wrong English, but I've had love for the Matrix trilogy for as long as I could, since it's been out. So that's fun.
All right, and last but not least, Daniel, your history with what was the Matrix trilogy.
Okay. So, well, Tracy, when you mentioned Sati, I have an idea for Sati, but we'll get to that when we're actually talking about Resurrections. Okay, so my experience with Matrix, I was too young in '99 to like really remember like Matrix and stuff, but I remember like the bullet time stuff was like all the rage, and there was like a parody in it a lot, and like comedic stage plays and all kind of stuff. And it wasn't until I think 2003, when Reloaded and Revolutions, the hype surrounding those movies was like the thing. And like I saw Matrix on TV6 with my mom, and that was the edited version,
All right. Is it what they say? Okay, well, they probably didn't do this on TV6, right? But I know on like WGN, right? The infamous station when it comes to weird censoring, right? I'll give you the flipper, and then I'll ask for my phone call. Or like when Trinity's outside on her bike, she said shoot instead of shit. It's like these weird,
that's
weird sort of like
what?
Yeah.
No,
that
no,
really
but
did happen. Like on God, that happened.
Good.
no,
Lord.
but I remember the tank edit. Like, believe it or not, you piece of slime, you're still gonna burn. Like,
Yeah.
really,
I
really,
remember that.
yeah.
They don't want to alienate the Amish audience.
Yo.
Oh, I'm dead.
Yeah. So yeah, I saw the Matrix on TV6 with my mom. I think she just wanted to know what the hype was. She didn't. I could see her like getting into it, like when Neo was on the run with from the agents. She was like, "Run, Neo, run!" And so I was like, yeah, she was getting into it. I was getting into it, but she didn't love it as much as I did. I was like, oh yeah, this is really good. This is really cool. This is a really cool movie. It transcends the bullet time because it's just a really good movie on its own, and it's a world that's worth exploring. So yeah, I was too young in 2003 to see Reloaded and Revolutions in theaters, so when it came out on Cinemax the year after, I watched it, and apparently I was a really stupid kid because I was just entertained by what I was seeing on the screen. I didn't even care about the story. I was like, whoa, an agent just jumped on that car and it flipped over. It's like, okay. I was a pretty dumb kid, and all this stuff I was seeing on screen entertained me. So, and even in Revolutions, the climactic fight between Neo and Smith was enough to get me hype, like the operatic music, and the the credits. I could sit down and watch those credits just for the music because it had a really good soundtrack. A really good soundtrack. Yeah, it's a really good soundtrack. And later on, I discovered, wow, people really didn't like these movies. And then I watched them over and like, okay, I could see why people don't like them because Reloaded is more philosophy, jargon, and not enough action. Way too much talking, not enough action. And Reloaded and Revolutions was just anticlimactic. And I could see how people could see that way. But, alright, my love for the sequels have kind of waned over the years. And I kind of gave up on the Wachowskis after I saw Speed Racer. I know y'all don't like it, but I personally don't like it. That movie gives me a headache every time I watch it. It gives me a headache. It's way too loud. The colors are way too loud. The acting is way too loud.
That's
I
why
skip.
it's awesome. That's why it's awesome. It's an anime.
I understand that, but
It
it's
is
like,
live action anime. It's
Yeah,
one of the
perfect.
most honest live action anime
Yeah, they
we've
nail
ever
it.
gotten.
Yeah.
I get that, but it's like, oh gosh, it's an adaptation. Whatever. Cloud Atlas, I skipped out on. Jupiter Ascending, I didn't watch in theaters. I tried to watch like the first few minutes of that movie, and I couldn't do it. But I have seen clips of Eddie Redmayne's performance in that movie, and
Oh God.
oh my sweet Lord Jesus Christ! If you
Life
if,
is about consumption.
if you were not aware of Eddie Redmayne like before Jupiter Ascending, you would
Yeah,
swear that he was a bad actor. You would
Whispering-
swear that
And
he
he
was a
won
bad
an
actor.
Oscar he won an Oscar before he did that movie, remember?
Yeah,
Whispering and shouting. He's really
yeah,
good at
it's like he didn't get proper direction. It's like I don't know what the Wachowskis were thinking. They were like, okay, you're gonna start really soft, you're gonna start really slow, and then when you're coming down to the end of the scene, you're gonna go explode in anger. It's like, okay, dude, calm yourself, calm down, calm
No,
down.
I definitely feel like I feel like Jupiter Ascending is easily the Wachowskis' most kind of directionless movie. Like every other film of theirs, you can tell what the goal was. Even something like Speed Racer, even if you don't like it, the goal is recreate the feeling of the anime in live action. With Cloud Atlas, it's this complex multi-timeline narrative. With the Matrix trilogy, it's this whole what is real, what is not, bending reality, and all this other stuff. With Jupiter Ascending, it is so hard to tell what the idea was. Like, kind of a magical girl anime space
Yeah.
opera, but in
Correct.
live action.
Well, that's pretty much it. But it basically, the mistake was it basically told the Matrix all over again. It's the same story. Right?
Yeah.
It's pretty much the exact same story, except, well, they're just changing the ontology of what's going on. Instead of virtual systems, it's space. And, but it's the
Right.
same story. Same story.
Yeah.
Except none of it works.
Yeah. So yeah, Wachowskis, they kind of winning these days. When I saw the trailers for Matrix Resurrections, I was holding out a tiny sliver of hope that this might be good, and then I saw it, and well, let's talk about this piece of crap.
Yes, let's.
Oh, a gauntlet
Let's
has
talk
been
about
thrown
it.
Alright,
down.
That's
ready.
what we mean
I'm
by
stretching.
yes,
I'm
right?
stretching as we speak.
Oh
on
yeah,
the call
no.
here.
Stretching
into
the
this.
neck, I'm ready.
Alright, so
Let me
if
get my
y'all don't
weed for
mind,
this.
if y'all don't mind, I will do the plot for this. I'll try to be as vague as possible, right? I'm gonna try.
I can explain the part because it's shocking a lot of people don't get it though. Like, what? You're not following what's going on? But whatever. Yeah, go ahead.
That's true.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll delve into detail into what was going on, right? Right. So basically, we are introduced to Thomas Anderson, right? Who is played by Keanu Reeves, right? But in this case, he's not this guy who's just working in some random, tech place. He is a video game developer, right? And ironically enough, because this movie is going full meta here now. So in this world now, I have to say in this world, right? He actually is the creator of the Matrix trilogy games. Yeah, they're actually games now, right? So there's this meta narrative about what those games and the idea behind the games meant, and you learn later on through some convo that they may or may not be related to people that Thomas and his co-worker, I believe it is, not so much boss, business partner, sorry, Smith, who is played by Jonathan Groff, right? So it's like that, right? While all this is going on, we learn that Thomas has been, seeing things, right? He's been going through some kind of like just mental issues, right? So every so often he has to visit a psychiatrist who is played by Neil Patrick Harris. I'm not going to say who he is at the point in time, right? And he's always given these blue pills, right? So it's like and you see that actually through this montage, which ironically is set to the same music that was used in the first trailer, right? Yeah, you just see that day-to-day life, and you just see how, while he's going through his day-to-day, he's just seeing images from, what we see now in the film, the previous movie trilogy, right? And speaking of that now, he also runs into a woman named Tiffany, who is played by Carrie Ann Moss, who just so happens to look like Trinity, right? So he's always reminded of that, right? So long story short, he's always seen like, just events that took place in the previous films, right? But he just attributes it to, oh, this was just ideas I had in the game, but why do they feel so real, right? So long story short again now, a few characters run into him. First being Bugs, who is played by Jessica Henwick. Henwick, sorry. Last time we saw her
Iron Fist,
Iron Fist, right?
Mm.
And we learned that, she is part of what is the Matrix pretty much, right? So, it's the same story pretty much. We were looking for you, you know what I mean? Because we always knew that Neo wasn't dead, we knew he was somewhere, right? So he kind of learns through some circumstances that, the world that he is in right now is not real, right? So that actually is the Matrix. And, well, Bugs characters from the real world, right? And we also meet who will eventually become Morpheus. I'll get into that as well too, right? But yeah, he has his own little backstory, which to say kind of just stops midway. It doesn't really go anywhere, in my opinion. But yeah, eventually just kind of, because as he's pretty much influenced by the character of Morpheus himself, right? Who is, well, dead, and we'll learn why soon enough, right? But yeah, he realizes that, he must be the Morpheus figure, so he must help Neo on his journey. And long story short, again, I keep using that term now, it's just Neo just realizing, hey, I'm Neo, right? I'm not Thomas Anderson, really. I'm actually Neo, and, the Matrix still exists, but it's a new Matrix. And, it's like, now I have to realize what the big threat is, because there is a big threat, and it comes in the form of, well, Smith, right? Not so much Agent Smith, but Smith. So, yeah, he returns as well. And I'll stop here, right? So just giving quick thoughts, just spoiler-free thoughts, and we'll get to everybody else's spoiler-free thoughts, and then we get into spoilers, right? So my thing with this show here, right? I would say that, it starts off really intriguing, really strong, have a lot of ideas. It does play with your mind a lot, though, and it is a lot to take in, right? But there are a lot of fascinating ideas, a lot of progressive ideas in terms of, not so much what the Matrix is, the possibility of the Matrix, but just the influence of the Matrix in, in pop culture, right? You see that echoed through, various conversations, especially with the creative team in, the pitch team, sorry, in, the same place that that Thomas is working in, right? You see the whole notion of, well, this is why these things are influential, and the idea of sequels and all that kind of stuff. So you could tell is Lana Wachowski kind of winking at the camera like, yeah, I know. You're probably thinking this show isn't really all that necessary, but in a way I know, and this is my commentary on it.
I don't even know if I would say it was like a wink so much as like a little glimpse into the frustrations of Lana Wachowski, because like I love Keanu Reeves' performances in those scenes, because he's the guy who made this trilogy of games, sitting there in a room full of people, all talking about
ideas. Yeah.
Right, and like they're all bouncing ideas off each other and talking about what the games are about, and he's like right there just listening to all this.
Yeah, he has no input.
No input whatsoever while everyone else talks about his games and like what made them important. And that whole line, and I'm sitting there like, how they let you put this, Lana? Which I feel like is just the one line.
They named WB directly to him because WB is a perpetrator.
Well, I guess our parent company, Warner Brothers,
has
insisted that we
insisted
that we make another one. And they're going to
There's no speculation. There's no speculation there, because that's actually what did happen.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised when I went on YouTube how many of these, film reporters and stuff didn't connect the dots, because Michael B. Jordan was tagged with a discussion in Warner Brothers for them to actually make the Matrix. Cool. And then Lana Wachowski and them announced like a year and a half later that got scrapped, and they say Keanu Reeves is signed on. So I think that quite literally, based on the news reports, that is actually what went on.
And what I find fascinating about that is, so it does end up being this meta commentary, because you get like, I feel like that's definitely the part of it that like it's one of the many parts where like Lana gets very personal, because it feels like there's a creative frustration that she's very much like kind of letting loose in these sequences, and like specifically like showing this frustrating creative process and how it's taxing on him, and how he's in this world that feels like this endless grind and just over and over. And like that, it's one of my favorite. I think it's like one of the best parts. Like for me, it's like one of my
it's very
that's a humor.
Should we call it New Nightmare? That's that New Nightmare.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to make the reference to Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Yeah.
But
It's very
instead
like
of the
that,
actors
yeah.
playing themselves, it's the actors playing, playing versions of the characters that they played,
Right.
years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. With the similar twist that like the so-called fictional world is actually a lot more real and is invading the real world,
Right.
which is always like I do love. I mean, I always love it when like I always love that kind of thing because especially since like also like New Nightmare, as you've already said, there's this whole element where they're commenting on the influence and the impact of the Matrix and how big it's been, and then like I thought what I liked about that whole sequence where like it's not just that they're all pitching ideas for what they think this new Matrix game should be. They're all talking about what they think the original means.
Yeah,
like
well, right. That
was hilarious because like he's sitting there with his head in his hands, listening to them all bounce alternate ideas for what it's actually about, and like there's this "I'm right here" energy to it, which I thought.
And in the case of Lana and her narrative, why it works so well is because of that conceit, right? Like, look, yes, the Matrix, you can interpret it from this lens or that lens or whatever it is. And I myself personally have a lot of like great like lens in terms of how to think about the films, but it has a very specific narrative, very specific. And this one delves deep into that. Like it gets into like stuff about mental health, suicide survival, stuff like that. I was like, wow, they actually put this in it. I would. It surprised me.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
well, let me just resume, please. I'll wrap up in a bit, right?
Right.
So it starts off very, very well, right? But I felt like when they get into like that second act though, and then they have to just explain what's going on now, that's when that's where the film falls into that reloaded trap, where it's like we have to over explain what's going on around us and why things are playing out the way they are now. So you have to go in as a fan, because specifically this movie is for the fans, is for people who actually have knowledge and memory of the film, because they actually don't hold your hand and tell you who characters are, and I have to give credit for that, right? But at points it just becomes too unbearable, though. It just felt like it was just all these calls, like, okay, remember in this and in this and in this and in this and in this, and you just have to kind of connect the dots now while you're just trying to follow this basically this simple, or seemingly simple story, right? But it kind of makes it just way more, just a little too overcomplicated because of that, right? Now, one thing this show is going to be criticized a lot for is, the use of nostalgia, right? And I felt here, while yes, there's like nostalgia when it comes to the fight scenes and different lines and all that kind of stuff too. But it just felt to the point like, okay, like if you're not gonna do anything different or original, then why are you going out your way to remind us of things that happened before? You know what I mean? Like, is there some kind of ulterior motive to all this, or are you just saying, well, that's the joke? You know what I mean? It's like similar to all these nostalgia-based films that came out over the past few years, right? And I always made this commentary that I always made this point that I was hoping that at least the show would have explored that, and they kind of do, but I just felt like it was just over-reliant on that nostalgia. So like literally every big major moment they have to remind you, oh, remember in this movie and that movie and all that kind of stuff, right? But last thing I just want to see now, right? Here to me is, I don't even want to call this a major flaw though, but I think this is like a huge misstep, right? With all the Matrix movies, right? You could say what you want about the philosophy and, all this stuff being pretentious and all that kind of stuff, right? At the end of the day, they are action movies. The point of these Matrix movies, right? Listen to me, is that they were just kind of taking the genre of action and just carrying it to like the most extreme. Like they were just trying to be as groundbreaking as possible, right? Say what you want about the Burly Brawl in Matrix Reloaded. Say what you want about the Neo and Smith fight in Revolutions. You never saw stuff like that before in a Hollywood movie, right? Here, I got no action scenes that really felt that way. The only action scene that really stood out to me though was the shootout that takes place in Thomas's workplace, which we'll get into in the spoiler section. That to me actually stood out because of how stylized and very John Woo inspired it was. And yes, it is very reminiscent of the hallway shootout scene in the first film, but I thought that it looked really dope the way how they handled it. And just the callbacks that they even threw in there actually kind of worked there. But I felt like the other scenes, especially that climatic scene, which I'll get into as well too, just did not work for me. Nothing about it stood out to me at all. It didn't even make any sense to me in the long run in terms of what was going on. And I felt like, yeah, this was where they dropped the ball, man. Like, I just saw nothing visually or action-wise that was like, oh, yeah, this is like some next-gen, like, groundbreaking shit. No, it was just like, yeah, I mean, it's the genre of sci-fi. I mean, you've seen the influence of The Matrix. I think that's the problem, too. You've seen the influence of The Matrix in so much in media or, over the past couple of decades that when you see how things play out here in this movie, it's just like, well, okay, well, that wasn't really all that interesting. And even goes down, it even reflects like in the visual effects as well too. Like, you see scenes and they look kind of cool, but then they have some moments, admittedly, that I felt look kind of like, I don't want to say cheap, but just like, wow, like,
Like
you
Hallmark
just
Channel trying to make a Matrix film.
yeah, like just pumping a little extra money and like make this shit look like real Oscar-worthy driven. I just watch this and like this looks like a normal, Hollywood sci-fi movie in my opinion. So that's the thing though. So at the end of the day, before we get to your thoughts, as much as it wants to dive into the commentary of originality and nostalgia, I felt like it relied too much on nostalgia and there was little originality in it. The premise, however, is great. I thought was very, very promising, right? But I just felt like just after that second act, it just had to delve into, callbacks, this thing, that thing, references.
Right.
And then at the end, which I will get into as well, I want to talk about that end. It's just like, well, I just don't feel this. I just don't feel this at all. So Ricardo, tell me how wrong I am.
All right, so Morpheus,
There you go.
Morpheus, Dorpheus, Orpheus, go eat some walruses, porridges, Morpheus, right? So if you get that joke, well done.
Why does that sound like a rap song? That sounds like something Eminem
it's-
would have seen.
No, look it up and see where that joke come from. It's great. Morpheus,
Right,
Dorpheus,
right.
Orpheus, right? It's one of the funniest bits ever. Say the line, Ricardo, from the Simpsons meme, right? 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. Yay!
So good thing you bring up that, Ricardo, because while I was watching this show, I was thinking, yep, this is exactly what Ricardo said it was going to be.
Yeah,
or what you would insinuating it would have been. I was telling myself the same thing.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
a lot of great ideas, but just
a lot of decent ideas, a lot of very interesting subtext, like especially that first act. Great, a lot of really great subtext on what the
Yes.
illusions are.
Mhm.
But the main problem is the two things. The establishment was pretty weak and the world building was pretty weak. Like the extra new world building is pretty weak. And I would have loved to see an extended version of this as a limited series, a la Watchmen. Like if they did the same story and we got like a 6 to 8 episodes of this, I'm sure it would have been fine.
No, I agree.
Perfectly fine. Because here's the thing. Even though the core conceit involving Neo and Trinity is what sticks and mostly works in my opinion, I was actually more interested in the crew of the Nemesign. Right, I actually was liking those characters, like when they're bringing them all the new technology, the stuff that evolved in the 60 years since the events of Revolutions. I'll
talk about that, but go ahead.
I was digging a lot of that, like what the evolution of the world is and all these ideas, and then who fits into what and why. I thought I would have missed Fishburne, and I didn't. Right, because what they did with Morpheus and Yahya Abdul Mateen, I actually liked a lot. Like I like that conceit because it's Neo building Morpheus again, but a version of him to do this rigmarole plan to escape this version of the Matrix, and while they learn what's going on with the analysts and whatever it is. I like that, but the person I really missed was Weaving. I felt they really needed
True.
Jonathan Groff was not a good.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah,
he was terrible.
Don't get me wrong.
Why have him as
Groff
Smith
is a
at
great
all?
actor. He's a great actor, but as Smith,
you don't work as Smith at all. Like not even close. Like it wasn't, and you needed Weaving. You really needed Weaving. You're right. And that was a big problem. I think a lot of the production issues was just probably due to COVID, to be honest, because everything felt so small.
Because Lana Wachowski actually didn't want to finish this movie.
Yeah, I heard it. It's like clearly it's a lot of production stuff, clearly, because everything felt small scale. The IO felt small. The new Matrix felt small. The action is okay, but it had the Revolutions problem for me where it's just uninspired, right? And on top of that, too small scale. At least Revolutions had a big grandiose Dragon Ball Z fight, right? But this was just small scale and uninspired for my liking. Very little of it works or is interesting. The only fight that was kind of cool or interesting, and again, when they introduced the whole swarm agent concept, was the fight in the train. That was okay, but still everything was shot too close, and I didn't really feel that. I will listen. Stuff like this is the nature of production. I get a feeling that COVID undermined a lot of that. So look, I had to chop my hands on that. I can't really judge it for what it is. But yeah, that's about it. Everything is just clearly smaller than what it is. But again, for me, the core conceit involved with Neo and Trinity is what sticks and mostly works, in my opinion. I thought that was great. The two of them bouncing off each other, what they did with it, that final conceit with her, because again, this is like one of the things about the first film is the troubling undertone about what is being said, which is everybody that don't get with the reality of the picture are nobodies and not important people. You know, if you're not one of us, you're one of them, and they kind of real play with that, Jared. Like they carry it to a real extreme. It's like her own family. She has a family. Holy shit. Like they play with that premise and making it work in the context of the world.
Yeah.
And right, so that's my last point, and then I'll give my rating, and then from there.
Yeah, well, we'll give ratings at the end actually, right after the spoilers, if you don't mind.
Well, whatever. I don't see a bunch of spoilers anyway, so it's like.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So
okay.
my conceit is here's what this feels like. It really feels like Lana still taking the Baudrillard critique to heart, because the second films really operate like a kind of critique of the first film, and it was clearly in response to what Baudrillard said about it, and because Baudrillard is the one who influenced all of this, you know, she kind of doubled down on how it's supposed to work, and it really felt like that. Like it is clearly a more personal film, right? From an author standpoint, it works in that sense. But then it also feels like a try to line up with a Baudrillard style critique of the concept of the Matrix and the concept of simulation and simulacrum and all of that, right? We had to get into all of that academic nonsense. Again, if it was a 68-part miniseries on HBO Max, come on, we could have done this. It would have worked. But 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, sorry. It is just a troublesome issue, and you cannot get around that. Sorry to say it. This is the times we live in. And I was really ashamed that she couldn't get... I felt they should have done that. They really should have done 6 to 8 episodes of a run, make it work, and tell that conceit and you know, really get into the conceit of what's going on in terms of the systems of control and what is being told. Well, you said no ratings, but I'll tell my rating anyway. Yeah, go okay. No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. But I'll tell my...
I like how he's like, you know, I just want to tell my rating anyway. I don't care. Screw y'all, right? CC, your spoiler-free thoughts on this movie here. Don't worry, guys. We're gonna get to spoilers soon enough, but you know, just general for those who haven't seen the film as yet. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, spoiler-free. I kind of didn't have any expectations going in. Like I again, like my thoughts on the original trilogy. I'm more of a fan of the Wachowskis as filmmakers than I am of the original trilogy specifically. But I was pleasantly surprised. Like Ricardo said, it feels a lot more personal, because I know that like one of the big critiques of 2 and 3 is that there are films that become so big and epic and huge in their scale that there's kind of a personal touch lost to them. And Resurrections feels like Lana kind of getting a lot more personal and a lot more, because like at the end of the day, this is very much like the stakes for this particular film are they're a lot more personal than previous films.
Yeah.
Like there's this love story at the very center of it, and that's where the stakes really are. Like it's not about like the fate of mankind anymore, because mankind has been saved in the original trilogy. And like, yeah, technically there's like stuff like that that's still being continued, but like but that's less of a focus than like the love story part, and that's why there's that quote at the very end of the credits there where Lana dedicates the film to her parents, and it says love is the genesis of all things. And clearly that's the kind of attitude that and so introspective. Right. Obviously, like any Wachowski movie, it swings pretty wide, and there are things it doesn't quite hit. Like I think a lot of the meta commentary that's reflecting on nostalgia and franchises and things like that hits pretty well, I think, like especially in the first act. There is a pacing problem. Into the second act, there's the pacing kind of starts to ping pong all over the place, where instead of streamlining this into a more linear story, it kind of starts to, and again, if this had been like a show, you could have had the chance to like space that out a little more, but the pacing starts to ping pong all over the place. I really missed Yu-Ping Yuan. I think it's Yu-Ping Yuan who did the fight choreography on the original trilogy.
Yen Wu-Ping.
Yen Wu-Ping. Yeah, I missed his fight choreography so much. Like the new film, like the action is pretty good, and some of the action sequences are really inventive. I mean, like I was tripping out at some of the use of like, because like I normally hate high frame rate in movies, especially since like a lot of filmmakers are trying to push it and do it as this new thing. Like Michael Mann always manages to make his films look worse with high frame rate. Looking at you, Gemini Man. But the way that Lana uses it in like a couple of the action scenes to kind of emphasize like a disorienting effect. The use of there's a couple sequences that have this really inventive thing where like one character can like slow time down for everyone else, and I thought those sequences are really creative. But I think Lana is missing a couple other voices in the room to like specifically help choreograph and manage the fight sequences. But I appreciated how personal it was, and I appreciated it as like as like a meta narrative, and I love all the things it is attempting to do. So honestly, for me, it doesn't feel better or worse than the original trilogy. As I said, the original, like for me, even the original Matrix trilogy felt very like big ideas. Execution isn't always like the greatest thing, and like I feel like this fits very neatly. So my rating is still the same, like a 8 or 9, like out of 10, which is the same rating I give the rest of the trilogy. Like around that same. But yeah.
So okay, we'll see. So we give it a read. So all right, cool. I will save mine.
I forgot. I'm sorry.
I will save mine for last, right? Michael, your spoiler-free thoughts on Resurrections.
So oh geez. Don't worry, Matthew. I'll follow instructions and not rate it. Okay. Somebody had to give Matthew some love.
That's not what I'm saying.
Matthew saying something and it's like butter to it. It's hilarious. Anyways, that is nothing. So this is what I think, right? I think The Matrix is both a bad movie and a cool movie, Resurrections, marbled into each other. And because of that, I have mixed feelings about it. Like some things about it, I think absolutely horrendous. And some things about it, I was like, I'm glad I lived this long to see this, right? As a person who is a fan of the original trilogy, because as much as I have issues with the original trilogy, is something that I can't stop watching because I just like what was done. Even the bad ones, I just like Revolutions. I've watched Revolutions several times actually, right? So I was always gonna see this no matter what because I love The Matrix. And I'm really, really conflicted because like there are parts of this that straight up look like a student film, like straight up like a student film. Like I was joking earlier, I said it's like the Hallmark Channel made a Matrix film, because a lot of times it feels like that. And I could partially get behind the COVID being an issue, but because I was following the production since they announced it, like I was religiously following all the updates and all the intimate filmmaker articles that comes out, in the filming and stuff. I know that part of it is also Lana's desire to make it this way, because she said in multiple interviews, obviously the parents being an angle and the fact that she wanted to shoot it very over the shoulder, put the camera on the cinematographer's shoulder and just go and shoot with one camera. And Keanu and they even discussed, the differences that made that. They said in many setups that they didn't even like. And Keanu, this is stuff that they discussed going into it now, because they filmed for like, I think 2 to 3 months before they got their first shutdown when the whole world kind of started to go to garbage. But yeah, so I know I tried to go into it. When I saw the trailer, I noticed the difference in style, because one of my favorite things about the original trilogy was the level of planning that went into what we saw on screen. Because I don't know if you guys remember, they had this anime guy draw all these storyboards and all these comic artists and real brilliant visual talent that they brought in on the original Matrix to craft this whole thing. And this approach, I knew it was going to be different. It was going to be very almost David O. Russell shoots an action film, right? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go into it trying to accept that. But from the time I saw the trailer, I was like, this doesn't look like Matrix. Matrix is like anime, right? It's like just these crisp, clean frames, and very sometimes it's like Sergio Leone level staging, and then other times it's like you're watching animated thing come to life, right? So that part of the Matrix was one of my favorite things, right? The acting and the style. And when I went into this, I felt like the tone was also different. There are moments in this with straight up jokes like bordering on Marvel stuff, and some of that stuff took me out. So for me, like the biggest change for me was the tone, and the editing for me was really choppy. Like there are times I'm watching it and I'm trying to take in some information, and they're doing all these weird. Well, when we go into spoilers, I'll talk about specifics. They're going into all these weird cuts and all these things, and it starts to feel very student filmy. And I was like, what's happening here? This doesn't feel like a really refined entry into the Matrix franchise. And in terms of the performances, I didn't like a lot of the acting, unfortunately. I felt like Keanu, he did okay for the most part. I mean, it's better than some of his other projects recently. Some of the acting that I've seen. But he did okay. But some of the other cast members, I felt like they were very, really forgettable. So my, I was really mixed on it. The philosophy in this one thing I liked with this film, though, that I felt like I didn't like with Reloaded and Revolutions, was they tied the philosophy, which was a lot lighter this time. But the one thing I appreciate with Resurrections is it had an emotional through line. Because the first Matrix is really what Star Wars and all those things are, right? Is I'm a special boy, the story.
I'm calling it that from now on.
Yeah. It's really that. I'm a special boy. And I think I didn't see Jupiter, but everybody bashed it and said that was, the same I'm a special boy, but a girl's version, right? And that's why we like those movies. Like, that's why the first Star Wars is like the best thing ever for a lot of people, because deep down inside, everybody wants to feel like they could be the hero. And it's like the first Matrix is like the same thing you feel when you watch like a Jackie Chan movie and he just like kicking everybody ass, right? It's like, I could do that, And Neo, the constant ping pong between if Neo is this thing or not, it kept you engaged now. And that's what I really like about the first one. And Reloaded, what they lost to me was Neo turned into a plank of wood. There was no emotional through line to pin all of this philosophy on. And it was just like it was basically in philosophy class, and philosophy class 101 in university, right? And that's what I didn't like about those, because I feel like they could have really tried to put some more context and emotion into all of the philosophy and not have it float by itself, because to be honest, like, it is good by itself. Like, it's really good. Like, when you really go into what was being said in Revolutions and Reloaded, is really cool stuff. So I think the trailers would have connected the dots on this, but it's really Trinity and Neo's their connection in this that carries the movie. And for me, that is one of the few points I would give it, is that while I was watching it, unlike Reloaded and unlike Revolutions, I had something to kind of anticipate a little bit. And I'm not mad at all the other flashy stuff. Like, I love the IO stuff. I love the industrial design. I love the some of the world building. Because I think Ricardo mentioned that it wasn't as fleshed out, but which I agree with. But some of it, the little bits that we get to see, I was okay with it. But that's really my main thoughts for now, because I want to say more, but spoilers.
All right, so Tracy, quick spoiler-free thoughts on Resurrections.
Actually, funny enough, I have in my notes, where is it? I have this here. It says it's The Force Awakens. For want of a better way of putting it, this is The Force Awakens. Whether it is you liked Force Awakens, yay. If you didn't like Force Awakens, that is the kind of, that's where you will probably fit in. In terms of, like Star Wars or like Force Awakens, you came in and you saw things that it reminded you of home, of Star Wars, that kind of vibe, but it wasn't as ridiculous as, let's say, Solo. And in like manner, for me, Matrix Resurrections has that same vibe in terms of this is reminding you of home, reminding you of the thing that you love about the Matrix, and it's bringing you back into the world. It also feels a little bit like an epilogue, like if they said, this is it, this is how Neo and Trinity's story ends, that would be fine by me. So I don't really have a problem with that. I actually really did dig it. The first part, I heard you guys talking about like the first part was cool. The first part for me was kind of annoying. I don't know. I just like sat down and was watching part of it. And the first part of it was kind of annoying, but then afterwards, it started to pick up and it started to feel like, oh yes, okay, so this is the thing. The revelation of who is who and what and why and how. Those two particular characters there was fun for me, and I have some thoughts on Smith being Thomas's boyfriend, but that's another story all entirely. I didn't really have like that much of a stress with it. I have the soundtrack as per usual. I think like Resurrections brought a kind of a vibe to it in terms of asking, okay, we know that with the trilogy it was like the nature of life and what does it mean to be alive. Here we're talking about like living and what does living actually what does living actually mean, and how does it work in a world that in a cycle where we tend to repeat the same mistakes and do the same BS as per usual as a human race. How do we know that we are actually living versus just being alive? And I kind of liked that. My one joke is that Neo is the elder millennial of this movie, in terms of him going and not having to deal with these younger people, and they're talking about micro things and portals and all that kind of stuff, and he just knows phone booths. So he's like the elder millennial, just kind of living his way through that whole stuff. I have other notes here, but they're more spoilery kind of something. There was this one thought that did cross my mind watching it play out. I don't think it's spoilery, but I remember seeing that I remember seeing a post on social media years ago where they played around with the idea that Bruce Wayne is actually in a mental institution, and his doctor is called Dr. Joe Carr, and all the villains that are there are actually orderlies and all that kind of stuff. So that's how he's interpreting his whole vigilantism, as just being in a mental institution. And that for me, kind of like that crossed my mind when I was looking at it, in terms of how Thomas sees the world versus how Neo sees the world. And in a very weird kind of way, especially when they started to talk about Warner Brothers. You remember that scene in America? You remember coming on towards the end of America's Sweethearts, for those who saw America's Sweethearts, years and years ago, where the director stops doing the film that the studio wanted him to do and just does this whole take on what Hollywood is and the actors, and kind of spewing all the business, and everybody was just kind of like, ew, what's happening? That is kind of where my brain went to that. I think it was Christopher Walken was the director, was acting as the director. All in all, I had fun. I had fun with it. It was a vibe, and Matthew knows how I pretty much I got my Matrix binary mask, and I have my stuff and all this kind of stuff, because it was one of those.
Oh yeah, that mask is hella dope, by the way. I love it.
I shall send word to the creator so that she can maybe make more. Yeah, I had fun with it. There were parts of it that was, like I said, the first part was hella annoying for me, but it was cool. It was vibes. So that's me, non-spoilery.
All right. And last but not least, Daniel, your thoughts on Matrix Resurrections?
Tracy, you stole my opinion. It was the Force Awakens. It was the Force Awakens for me. It was the Force Awakens with a lot of meta humor. And the humor in the beginning of the movie, there was a part of it that made me be like, nah, this is not for me. This is not for me. And we'll get into that when we get to spoilers. The action scenes were not as good as the previous. I agree. When I was watching the third act, I was like, why is the action not so inspired? I mean, we expected better from a Matrix movie. Yeah, the ideas were good, especially with Neil Patrick Harris's character, mm-hmm. the analyst. He was an interesting concept that I don't know. It just, the ideas, they were there, but they felt kind of half-baked. And I don't know, like, this is a really hard thing for me to judge without getting into spoilers. So, my opinion on it, I did not really care for this one. Sorry, but let's go into spoilers because I need to talk about some crap.
Yeah, same.
yes, let's, right?